So in a prior video, I was telling you guys that there's one thing about this truck that I just can't stand. Now, sure, this truck is not nearly as nicely optioned as the Ram that I had before it. Doesn't have a heated steering wheel or heated seats or ventilated seats or power adjustable pedals or power folding mirrors or automatic climate control, remote start. This XLT doesn't have anything on it compared to the Ram. But honestly, I can get used to all that. It's not that big of a deal. One thing that does drive me crazy though is this little bitty 4-inch screen. It's not a touch screen and it's so small that you can barely see the backup camera image in it. It's a lot harder to use when you're backing into a spot or when you're hooking up to a trailer or whatever the case might be. It doesn't have Android Auto on it, which I used a lot in the Ram. It's just a super basic, kind of old school, to be honest, radio. It does have the sync system, which is the worst infotainment connectivity system ever invented. I've hated sync. Every Ford vehicle I've ever had with sync on it has been just aggravating, to say the least. So this has to go. And I looked at some options, you know, the Ford retrofit. Some of these Ford XLTs did have what they called a premium package, and you could get, I think it was an 8-inch touchscreen on there. There's a couple of companies that sell retrofit kits for that, but it's like $2,000 to do that. So that got crossed off the list. And then I saw where a company called Linkswell has some like tablet style kits that replace this entire dash area here with one giant tablet screen, which looks pretty awesome. And the new Gen 6 version is out now, which they say works pretty well too. But even those are like $1,600, kind of out of my budget. So I decided to just go the old-fashioned way and buy an aftermarket head unit, a 7-inch head unit. And I got some stuff from Crutchfield that should help me to complete this task and get rid of this little 4-inch screen. So I listen to Sirius XM radio most of the time, so you have to buy one of these aftermarket Sirius XM tuners to connect to your aftermarket head unit if you want to retain that. Got me a JVC head unit here. This is a model KWM 785, and it was reasonably priced, and I like it because it's a shallower depth head unit, so you've got more room back here behind it to stuff all your wiring and everything. And then of course you've got to get one of these dash kits from Maestro here, because this will allow you to fit your double DIN sized unit, and it also allows you to keep your manual climate controls. I have the manual controls, and so you just basically transfer those over to this new dash bezel. Cool thing about this bezel is you get a nice little storage cubby that you didn't have before, and it has integrated USB and HDMI ports on there. So put all this together and it should help me to accomplish what I want, which is a factory look with a touch screen and a larger, crisper display. So one of the nice things about not having the flow-through console is that you can sit here. So my head doesn't have a lot of headroom, but this will make it a lot easier to get in here and work and do what I need to do. So let's move the ducts and everything out of the way here. So we're going to begin, oh, by the way, the tools, plastic or Teflon trim tool. You don't want to use metal because obviously all of your interior parts are plastic. So if you use plastic to remove plastic, it'll work a lot better, trust me. So we're going to get in here with these plastic trim tools and start popping these pieces out. So essentially what we're going to do is take this top storage cubby out and remove the speaker that's in there, because on my truck I have a center speaker up here. And then this whole dash will just pull out. We will remove this little 4-inch screen, unhook all the connections, and then basically we're going to take the climate controls and transfer all of this, the circuit board, the knobs, the buttons, transfer it over to the new dash bezel and start putting things back in. So not a whole lot to it. It's far as that goes. This is one of those jobs that's just busy work, really. But the good thing about it is anytime you order something from Crutchfield, they always give you really good instructions. I've ordered from Crutchfield for years, and they make it as easy as they possibly can. So I'm going to go really careful here. I'm going to put this is the other tool you'll eventually need. It's a 7mm. But for now, we're just going to use this plastic trim tool. So I'm going to stop recording here so that I can pay attention to what I'm doing. Because like I just said, you want to use these plastic tools, but you want to go slow so that you don't break anything. Most of this stuff will just snap up, but you got to be careful. So you got a couple of 7mm back there. Once you take the speaker grill off, you pop that out. You can see the 4 plastic clips that hold it in. Make sure that these little white things, those little white clips, stay on their tangs there. But anyway, once you pop that out, you got 2 7mm back there, and then that whole lid can come out, storage cubby. And then it will expose these 2 7mm right here. Take those out, and then this whole radio bezel will just pull straight out. Obviously, you got a whole bunch of connections back here to unplug. Again, see those orange clips on the tangs? Make sure that all of those stay on, because you're going to need those to reuse on your new bezel. So we'll unhook all of these wires, and then we'll take this little 4-inch screen out. And then, of course, like I said, you've got great instructions from Crutchfield there on how to go about modifying this to fit the new equipment. Probably going to have to do a little bit of cutting. I think that this little bar right here has to be cut out and moved to make room for the new stuff. And we'll see once we get to that point. But for now, I'm just unhooking all of this stuff, basically. So I've gotten to this point now where I am basically disconnected from all of the factory stuff. And I took out the little 4-inch screen, which had 4 bolts holding it in. So now the instructions say that this little plastic piece right here has to go away. So I'm going to use a Dremel tool, and I'm going to make a cut right here and a cut right there, and just simply take that away. There was a wiring harness, you can see it right there, that snapped into this hole. I don't guess it's necessary, but that's all that this really seemed to be there for, was just to hold that wiring harness up here. So like I said, obviously it's not needed anymore. So just make sure that you get all your harnesses tucked back out of the way so that you don't accidentally nip them with the Dremel tool, and we'll just go ahead and zip that off. And at that point, I think we'll be ready to start assembling the new dash kit. So by far, the most difficult part of disassembly is this part right here. Now they call this the camera module bracket, and apparently some trucks will actually have a camera module mounted to this bracket, and you can see the studs here for that. This truck didn't have the module on it, but obviously the bracket's still there, so you got to disassemble it. Now the reason it's so difficult is because when this thing is up in here, you've got to go down from the top, and down here in the bottom there will be a couple of 8mm bolts. But then up inside of here, like up underneath this part where you can't see it, there's a 7mm bolt. And the same thing over here on this side. See how the metal part of the bracket right here goes up inside there? 7mm bolts up in there. And like I said, you can't see them. You can barely even feel them. It's almost impossible to get tools on them. I did manage to do it, but it sucked. The way that I did it was I took those bottom bolts out, and then I bent this up like that and zip tied it to this top part so it would hold it up out of the way. And then that gave me just enough room to get my fingers and a ratchet, a little 1/4-inch ratchet up in there, and twist those 7mm out. Pain in the rear end, let me tell you. But other than disassembling the entire dash, there's just no other way to really do it. I finally did get it though, so now I got to try to finagle this thing and get it out of the dash. And then I think I will finally have enough space to start installing the new stuff. So at this point, basically what you do, you're going to lay your factory bezel, dash kit, whatever you want to call it, out next to your new one. and you're just going to start swapping things over. So like in my case, the exhaust brake button, the hazard flashers button, you're just going to squeeze those and push them out, retrofit them over here. We're going to have to use a T10 socket to get all of these little bitty screws out, and don't misplace them and keep them organized, because once you start to disassemble these little screws, some of them are going to be longer than others. So you want to make sure you keep them all organized, because when you start moving this stuff over here, you don't want to use screws that are too long because they'll push through the front of the bezel. Like for example, you can see how this provision right here is taller than that one. See that? So you don't want to use a really long screw in this one because it might push through the front. And again, Crutchfield gives you some really great directions here on how to do this. So just take your time, go slow, swap everything over, and then you'll be ready to start putting the aftermarket radio back in. All right, next morning, I ran out of daylight yesterday. So here's where I've basically gotten to. You can see I've got the head unit test fit. I got to take it back out because there's still some connections to make. But I've got all of this new dash trim assembled. You've got a little storage pocket down here at the bottom that has all of your connections for HDMI and audio and USB. I probably will only use the USB because I don't really get into connecting my devices to the head unit for music. But anyway, I got my buttons reinstalled up there for my exhaust brake and hazard lights. A couple of notes that I will mention. This thing is kind of confusing here in the center of it. You know, like I said, Crutchfield does give you instructions, but on this particular part, the instructions were a little bit vague. So a couple of things you want to make sure that you do. And the instructions did mention this, but it's a little confusing exactly how to do it. So you're going to put your temperature control knob over there in the center. Make sure that the control is set to the center, and then you have to make sure that you orient the gear. Of course, you can't see it right now because I've got this all assembled, but down there on the circuit board, you're going to orient the gear in a certain way. There's a little bitty notch on it, a little mark on the gear, and you want to make sure that mark is at the 10 o'clock position and it's pointing toward the smaller gear. So with the temperature knob centered and that little mark pointing toward the little gear, that'll keep everything oriented the way it needs to be so that your temperature control will work normally when you reassemble it. The other thing is the ribbon cables. It doesn't specifically say this in the instructions, but you're going to use the ribbon cable from the kit. They include a longer one that you have to use. So you're not going to reuse any of the ribbon cables that were existing in the truck originally. After I figured all that out, it wasn't all that bad. You know, attaching the ribbon cables and snapping those little white clips back in can be a pain. Be careful with them not to tear them up. But I think I have everything assembled now as far as the dash kit goes. So now I'm to the point where I've just got to figure out where all of this stuff goes. Of course, you've got your Maestro RR cable, or module, I should say, that you have to hook all your cables to. A lot of them are, you know, one size fits only one kind of thing. So hopefully not going to be too bad. Of course, I'm going to hook up my microphone so that I have the ability to use hands-free calling and all of that kind of thing. So just got to get all of this, you know, connected to where it's supposed to be according to that instruction sheet that Crutchfield sent me. And then we can start snapping everything back in. All right, guys. So I've got everything installed. Everything is hooked up. I confirmed that my steering wheel buttons work. Android Auto is working. Sirius XM is working. It's all working finally. It took some trial and error and going over the diagram several times, but I finally got it. And this is so much nicer to have Android Auto again. I can use my navigation again on the screen. You know, obviously it's a touch screen, so that's nice. And the backup camera works. Much larger, crisper display, so that's awesome too. So now comes the really fun part, which is trying to tuck all of these wires back in the dash and get all of this reassembled again nice and neat. Now the instructions will tell you that you're supposed to put your XM antenna outside on the roof. I'm going to attempt to just leave it right here on the dash. I'm going to put the GPS antenna over here and my Sirius XM antenna over there, so it's just much easier to do the routing. Going to take my microphone and just stick it right here, I think. So everything should work out pretty good, but that's going to be a nice upgrade for a lot less money than doing the Sync 3 8-inch screen upgrade from the factory. You know, the super cool thing about this is that you can hit the mode button on the steering wheel and you can actually change between trailer hitch view and your normal view. That's pretty awesome. Once you do get it installed, it does look pretty nice. I mean, look at that. It does look factory. And like I said, you end up getting a nice little cubby down here, plus you got USB and audio connections down there. You still got your manual climate controls. But this is pretty nice, and what I ended up doing with my microphone is I just stuck it in there. You know, when I pop this back into place, it's kind of holding that. And then I put my GPS antenna up there and my satellite radio antenna up here, and those are just secured with a couple of little pieces of Velcro. I took a Dremel tool and made some really small incisions in this cover so that the wires could have some space to come up through there. So yeah, it worked out pretty good. And while I was at it, I went ahead and installed my Pro Clip cell phone mount. It's kind of ugly because it goes all the way back there and clips onto one of the vents and then comes up here and clips on, but it's also very secure, and this is magnetic, plus it charges your phone at the same time, and it's got a good viewing angle. So, you know, I don't really care what it looks like. It's functional, it works. So this will be really great. All right, so I finally got it all done, and I ran into one more problem after I hooked everything up and I had the dash kit reinstalled and I had verified that the steering wheel buttons were working, the satellite radio was working, AM FM radio was working, Android Auto was working, everything seemed to be good to go. And then I checked my HVAC controls and they wouldn't even come on. I mean, like no lights would come on, nothing worked on the HVAC. I was like, oh man. So thankfully, it ended up being pretty simple to fix, but I spent a couple of hours stressing out over it. So here's what happened in my case. When I was disassembling the factory stuff, I noticed that the instructions that came with the iDatalink Maestro RR kit indicated that they wanted me to install the ribbon cables in the opposite orientation that they were from the factory. And I thought that was kind of weird. I was like, why would you do that? That's not going to work. But I triple checked, quadruple checked, and that's what the instructions said to do. It specifically said to install those ribbon cables with the black side up and the shiny side down. So that's what I did, and it just wouldn't work. None of the HVAC controls would work at all. So I was getting ready to go in there and switch them back around again just to see what would happen. And before I did that, I got online with Crutchfield and talked to another customer service rep on there. Crutchfield, by the way, is awesome. It's great working with them. They're always there to help you out. Don't think I could have accomplished this without them because I ended up contacting them 3 or 4 times through this process. But anyway, so I got in touch with them, and the guy I was talking to said, I've had this problem before, and usually when this problem comes up, it's because people put the ribbon cables in upside down. And I thought, well, there you go. I was wondering about that because the instructions were just point blank wrong. So I had to take all of the bezel, the dash kit, I had to take it all back apart again to get back down there to the ribbon cables and flop them back around the way that they were from the factory. And then once I did that, everything worked great. So now the air conditioning comes on, everything works like it's supposed to. So FYI on that. That part in the directions that tells you how to install the ribbon cables, do it the opposite way that it tells you to do it. Do it the way that they were from the factory, basically. So anyway, I got it all done, and it's really been nice. The JVC unit, the reason I went with that one is because, like I said, it does some extra things like vehicle functions. Like it'll actually show you like engine codes and gauges for the truck and everything on the screen. It's pretty cool. And it was just easier to set up too, because the parking brake wire, I was able to just, you know, run that in. I didn't have to physically go tap it into the parking brake, which was great. So I really like the JVC unit so far. My only complaint with it is the color isn't the best in the world. You know, I feel like it could have a little bit more color. And I finally found the settings in there to adjust the contrast and the tint and the color and that kind of thing. And I've played around with it for a while, but I still can't get it to have like what I would consider to be really good color. And it also seems like this screen has a little bit of glare too. I mean, the sun, it's not a perfectly sunny day. There are some clouds out here. And even so, there's some glare on the screen. So it's a little bit hard to read sometimes, but I mean, it is what it is, I guess. It comes with the turf. But overall, I really love it. The backup camera is so much nicer because it's a lot bigger. I can see it now. And the touch screen, I just love having a touch screen. It's so much easier to find your presets and all that. So anyway, I think that probably had 4 or 5 hours in this install. I have installed a lot of audio systems in the past, but never one that had to integrate with all of the CAN bus systems like this. You know, so I'm pretty familiar with wiring up audio systems and just doing, you know, electrical type mods on vehicles in general. But this was the first time I'd ever done one using the Maestro kit. And I gotta say, the instructions were pretty good, but there were some areas that were a little vague that could be worked on. I feel like that if I had never done any type of work like this before, I don't think I would have wanted to tackle this project. It ended up being quite a project. Like I said, I've got several hours in it. I'm glad that I didn't take it to an audio shop, because I think they work on like $150 an hour rate. So there's no telling what they would have charged me to do this. So I am glad that I did it myself. I learned a lot and I saved a lot of money, but I don't think I would ever want to do it again. And if I had never done anything like this before, I don't think I would want to try and tackle it, because it is kind of involved. There's a lot of wires behind the dash, a lot of connections that have to be made correctly. There is a lot to it, but overall, you know, if you've got some experience doing this kind of stuff, you can handle it. Keep your laptop nearby so that you can contact Crutchfield and get some help, because you're probably going to need that along the way. And in the end, once you get it done, you'll love it, have a sense of accomplishment. And like I said, it's a super nice upgrade for these XL and XLT trucks that came with that little bitty 4-inch non-touch screen. The sync system is gone. I've got Android Auto now, which I love. And it's just, like I said, a super nice upgrade. It makes the truck feel a lot more, I don't know, homely, I guess, you know, a nicer place to spend time in there now. So anyhow, I guess that's all I got for now. Finishing up my maintenance, transfer case and transmission, so I'll post that up pretty soon. But I guess that's about all I'm going to do for now on the old girl. Been a good truck so far. I've only had it for a couple of weeks, but getting ready to put it to work again, towing here pretty soon. So we'll see how it does with this enclosed trailer when we go camping. We'll talk to you guys later. Bye.